Maria had once believed her life would follow a straight and peaceful path. She had dreamed of working in her small-town sewing shop, saving a little money, maybe opening her own place someday. She imagined marrying her fiancé, having a simple home, raising 1 or 2 children, and living close to her mother. She never wanted anything huge or grand. She only wanted enough to live with dignity and peace. But life rarely moves the way a person plans. And Maria learned that in the most painful way a person could. 2 years before this day, Maria had been traveling to the city with her fiancé on an old motorbike. They were planning to buy cloth for a new work project she had been excited about. It was meant to be a turning point, something she thought would help her secure a better future. But a speeding truck on a narrow road changed everything. The motorbike slipped. She didn't remember the full crash. Only the heavy sound of metal striking the ground and her fiancé shouting her name. When she woke up, her world was different. Her right leg was gone below the knee. The doctors told her she was lucky to survive. But Maria did not feel lucky. She watched as her fiancé slowly stopped visiting, then stopped calling, then disappeared completely. Friends who once visited every week now came once a month, then not at all. Even neighbors who had shared tea with her mother for years avoided eye contact when they passed her home. It wasn't cruelty sometimes, it was simply fear. People did not know how to talk to someone whose life had cracked so suddenly. But to Maria, the silence felt like punishment. Her mother tried her best to be strong, but she was already weak from years of illness. Medical bills piled up faster than Maria could count, and the cost of therapy and medication was far beyond what they could manage. The sewing shop, where Maria had worked, let her go. They said kindly that the job required moving around all day, lifting cloth bundles, and helping customers. They said they were sorry. Maria nodded, smiled, and left quietly, but when she reached home, she cried harder than she ever had in her life. She tried stitching clothes at home. She made beautiful dresses, fixed torn shirts, and embroidered fine patterns. But people did not bring enough work to her small room. Her mother's illness became worse, and the landlord's warnings grew louder. Rent was overdue, and he gave her a deadline 2 months. If she couldn't pay, she would have to leave. Maria sold whatever she had. She sold her father's old pocket watch, which he had given her just weeks before he died. She sold furniture, blankets, and pots. She sold things that held memories. But even after all that, she had only a small amount saved. The doctors had told her she would walk again if she could get a proper medical prosthetic, one that was strong, fitted well, and allowed her to move with balance. But when she heard the price, she felt her heart tighten. It was more than she earned in an entire year. She tried to get help from charities, but the waiting lists were long, and there were too many people like her in need. She applied for every kind of support program she heard about, but nothing came through. Each door closed before she could even hope. Then came the hardest decision of her life. Maria first heard the idea by accident. She was inside the town marketplace trying to sell her mother's hand-woven shawl when she overheard a group of women whispering nearby. They spoke about other girls from nearby villages who earned money from travelers, money that could not be earned anywhere else. They said the money came fast, faster than any sewing work or tutoring. They said a woman just had to meet men and spend time with them. Maria did not understand everything they meant, but she understood enough. At first, she pushed the thought away. She told herself she would rather crawl on the floor for the rest of her life than think about such things. But as weeks passed and her mother's medicine ran low, as rent came closer to another deadline, as her own body grew weak from constant worry, the thought returned again and again. She told herself she had no choice left. She felt shame for even thinking about it. But shame did not fill stomachs, or buy medicine, or pay rent. One evening, with trembling hands, she went to the old boarding house at the edge of the market. It was a place where people often avoided looking. She knocked on the door. The owner, a harsh-faced woman, looked at her and sighed. She seemed to understand immediately why Maria had come. She told Maria she didn't belong in a place like this. But Maria begged. She said she needed money. She said she needed a prosthetic leg. She said she didn't want to lose her home. The woman stared at her for a long time, before finally nodding. Maria walked into a world she never wanted to enter. She told herself every day that this was only temporary, only until she saved enough money for the prosthetic. She told herself she would leave the moment she reached that amount. But the days were long and painful. She felt herself shrinking inside. She tried to remain strong for her mother. But some nights, she cried quietly into her pillow so her mother wouldn't hear. The shame, the exhaustion, the humiliation, it was too much for one heart to carry. Yet Maria still carried hope somewhere deep inside. A small hope, weak and almost fading, but still alive. She dreamed of the day she could stand again on two legs, work honestly, and walk freely without fear of falling. She dreamed of standing in front of a mirror and seeing a woman who was not broken. But each passing day made it harder to imagine that future. Sometimes she sat outside the boarding house during sunset, watching people walk by with steady steps she longed to take. And sometimes she saw a cowboy pass through town. A man riding a strong horse, with calm eyes and a quiet nature. He always bought supplies from the general store and rode back toward the far hills. He noticed her too. He always gave a small nod, a polite gesture. Something simple, but kind. Something she wasn't used to anymore. He didn't stare or judge. He just acknowledged her like she was a normal human being, not a burden or a scandal. Maria never expected anything from him. People came and went in this town. No one ever paused long enough to help her. No one ever cared enough to ask why a woman like her sat outside with tired eyes and a forced smile. But life was about to change again, this time in a way she never imagined. A cowboy was about to step into her life. And he would not just change her future. He would save her from a path she had entered only because the world left her no choice. Ethan had been riding into the town for years, but he had never paid much attention to the little bench outside the boarding house until the day he first saw Maria sitting there. He had been tying his horse outside the general store when his eyes caught the sight of a woman sitting alone, her back straight but her expression filled with something he couldn't name. She was quiet, calm, and visibly tired. He noticed her missing leg and the way she was trying to balance herself carefully on the wooden seat. He didn't know her story, but something about her stayed in his mind long after he left the town that day. Every week, when he came for supplies, flour, rope for the ranch fences, a few tools, he found her in the same place, sitting with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Sometimes she had embroidery work in her hands. Sometimes she just looked at the road with an empty gaze. Ethan wasn't a man who enjoyed talking a lot, but when he saw someone struggling, he could never ignore it. It was simply not in his nature. One late afternoon, he noticed her attempt to stand from the bench. She pushed herself up using one arm, but her balance shifted, and she started tipping forward. Ethan reacted without thinking. He rushed forward and caught her gently before she fell. Maria froze, shocked, embarrassed, and afraid that someone had seen her weakness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just lost my balance." "No need to apologize," Ethan said softly. "Here, take a moment." He helped her steady herself. Her hands were cold, and her breathing was uneven. She didn't meet his eyes, perhaps ashamed that she needed help, but he didn't think less of her. In fact, the more he saw, the more he respected the quiet strength she carried despite everything weighing on her. "Thank you," she said after a moment, her voice small but sincere. Ethan tipped his hat politely. "Anytime, ma'am." From that day on, something changed between them. Whenever Ethan rode into town, he began stopping near the bench. Sometimes he brought her warm bread from the bakery, saying it was extra, even when it wasn't. Sometimes he brought her a shawl, saying the weather was getting colder. Other days, He simply sat beside her for a few minutes and talked about simple things: the ranch, the horses, the weather, or the small happenings around town. Maria didn't talk much at first. She didn't want to be a burden. But slowly, she began answering his questions. Then, she started asking her own. With each passing week, she opened up a little more, showing him more pieces of her true self. He learned that she was gentle, polite, thoughtful, and intelligent. He saw that she tried to hide her struggles so she wouldn't worry others. He sensed that she carried a deep sadness, but she kept it hidden behind a brave smile. Maria never told him the part of her life she hated, the part that involved men who came to the boarding house at night, and the deals she made because she had no other choice. She never told him she was saving every coin for a prosthetic leg. She never told him she cried most nights out of exhaustion and shame. But Ethan could see something unspoken behind her calm face. He saw how tired she looked, how she forced herself to stay strong, how she flinched when loud voices passed by. He didn't know the details, but he knew she was fighting a battle alone, one she couldn't talk about. He also noticed how the town treated her. Some people ignored her. Others looked away when she passed. And a few whispered things that made him clench his jaw. He didn't like gossip, and he certainly didn't like when people talked badly about someone who was already struggling. One evening, Ethan finished purchasing his supplies and walked past the boarding house. He wasn't planning to stop, because Maria wasn't outside. But when he was almost past the old building, he overheard voices coming from the side alley. They belonged to a few men who often wandered the town, men he had never liked. At first, he tried to ignore them, until he heard Maria's name. He froze. He listened quietly, hidden by the shadow of the building. The men were laughing, speaking about her in a disrespectful and heartless way. They talked about how desperate she was for money. They spoke about the deals she made. They described things that told Ethan exactly what Maria had been forced to do. Ethan felt something in his chest twist painfully, anger, sadness, and disbelief hitting him all at once. His hands curled into fists. The idea that this gentle woman, who always tried to be polite, who always smiled, even when she clearly didn't want to, had been pushed into such a life. It shook him to his core. He didn't step out and confront the men. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew Maria's dignity mattered more than his anger. Fighting them wouldn't help her. It would only make her situation harder. So he walked away quietly, his jaw clenched, heart heavy, and mind full of questions. He couldn't stop thinking about her the whole night. He remembered the trembling in her hands when she almost fell, the sadness in her eyes, the way she avoided talking about herself. He realized she wasn't hiding because of pride, she was hiding because she was trying to survive with whatever strength she had left. The next morning, Ethan rode into town earlier than usual. He found her outside, sitting on the bench with embroidery in her lap. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. "Morning, Maria," he said gently. She looked up and forced a smile. "Good morning, Ethan." He sat beside her. He didn't speak for a moment. He wanted to choose his words carefully. He wanted to help, not hurt. "How are you doing today?" he asked softly. Her smile faded a little. "I'm all right." "You don't look all right," he said honestly but kindly. She looked down at her hands. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. Ethan noticed her fingers were trembling slightly. Finally, he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Maria, I know you're going through something hard, something you don't want to talk about, but I want you to know I'm here. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to question you. I'm just here." Maria blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. She hadn't expected him to speak with such gentle understanding. She hadn't expected anyone to care enough to ask. "I'm fine," she whispered again, but her voice broke slightly. Ethan turned toward her. Her shoulders shook. She held her breath, trying to steady herself. But the weight she had been carrying alone for so long was becoming too much. Ethan didn't push her. He didn't demand answers. He simply sat quietly beside her, so she wouldn't feel alone. And something in that silence, something in his presence, something in the warmth of his voice, gave her the courage she had lost years ago. She didn't tell him everything that day, but she looked up at him with eyes full of pain and whispered, "I wish life had been kinder." Ethan felt his heart break a little. He had no idea how deep her wounds went, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her face them alone anymore. Maria sat on the bench the next morning with her hands tightly folded in her lap. She had come early, long before the sun had warmed the ground. She didn't know why she felt so nervous. Maybe it was because Ethan had seen through her yesterday. Maybe it was because she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope mixed with fear. Hope that someone finally cared. Fear that he might walk away once he learned the truth about her life. She kept telling herself not to expect anything. People left. People always left. Her fiancé had left. Friends had left. The sewing shop had let her go. Even neighbors who once admired her embroidery now turned their heads when she passed. Why would a cowboy, someone strong, steady, and kind, stay when he discovered how low she had fallen? She thought she could hide everything forever. But yesterday, when Ethan spoke softly and told her she didn't need to pretend, she felt her heart crack open. It scared her. It comforted her. It confused her. When Ethan arrived that morning, she didn't hear the horse at first. She was lost in her thoughts. But then she looked up and saw him walking toward her with the same calm steps he always had. He tipped his hat slightly, and a gentle smile touched his face. "Morning, Maria," he said kindly. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. "Good morning." He sat beside her, leaving a respectful space but close enough to show he wasn't afraid of whatever truth she was hiding. For a long while, he didn't speak. He simply sat with her, letting the quiet air around them settle. Maria appreciated that. She wasn't used to silence being peaceful. Most silences in her life carried judgment, disappointment, or fear. But Ethan's silence felt different. It felt patient, safe, steady, like he was waiting for her to speak when she was ready. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Ethan," she whispered, barely audible. "You said yesterday that I don't have to pretend with you." He nodded slowly. "That's right, you don't." She looked down at her hands again. They were shaking a little. What if I'm ashamed to tell you? What if you think I'm someone who doesn't deserve help?" "What? Places? What?" He shook his head immediately. "Maria, nothing you say will make me think you don't deserve help." She felt tears sting her eyes even before she spoke. She blinked them back, but they kept rising. Her voice broke. "You don't know what life pushed me into." "I want to understand," Ethan said softly. "Only if you want to tell me." She exhaled shakily. She could either keep hiding and slowly drown alone, or she could take the chance just once to trust someone who looked at her without judgment. Slowly, painfully, she began to speak. She told him about the accident that took her leg, the fiancé who left, the friends who drifted away, and the job she lost. She told him about the landlord threatening to push her and her mother out of their home. She told him how she sold everything she had, even her father's watch, and still couldn't gather enough money for a prosthetic. She didn't look at Ethan while she spoke. She watched her own hands, watched the dust on the ground, watched anything except his eyes. She feared what she might see there. Then, with her voice trembling, she told him about the hardest part. She didn't give details. She didn't need to. She only said she had done things she never wanted to do because she had no other way to save her mother. No other way to survive. When she finished, she waited for the moment she feared most. The moment he would stand up and walk away. But he didn't move. He didn't speak right away, either. He sat with his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together, staring at the ground in deep thought. Maria's heart pounded, terrified of what he was thinking. After what felt like a lifetime, he finally turned his head to look at her. "Maria," he said quietly, "you didn't choose that because you wanted to. Life cornered you. When people are pushed to the edge, they grab whatever they can to survive. That doesn't make them bad. That doesn't make them less human." She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. She tried to stay quiet, but the tears wouldn't stop. Ethan didn't touch her. He respected her space, but he stayed right beside her, making sure she didn't feel alone, even for one moment. When she finally calmed a little, she whispered, "I never wanted to live like this. I feel like I lost who I was." Ethan shook his head gently. "You didn't lose who you were. You survived. That takes more courage than most people realize." She breathed shakily, wiping her eyes. "I didn't tell you so you would pity me. I don't pity you," he said firmly. "I respect you. You're stronger than you know." Those words shook her more deeply than anything else had. She never thought anyone would ever use the word strong for her again. Ethan straightened slightly, as if he had decided something important. "Maria, I want to help you. Really help you. Not for one day or one week, but properly." She looked confused. "Help me? How?" "How?" "With your leg," he said gently. "I know how much a good prosthetic costs. I also know you've been trying to save for it. Let me take care of that." Maria's eyes widened, full of disbelief. "No, Ethan. I can't accept that. It's too much. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. This isn't charity," he replied. "It's just something I can do. Something I should do." "But why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do something so big for someone like me?" "Because no one else has," he answered simply. "Because no one should suffer alone. Because you deserve to walk again. And because I can't sit by and watch a good person break under a weight they shouldn't have to carry." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Ethan, I can't let you spend so much money on me." He leaned forward slightly. "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it. And if I can give you even a little of your life back, then it's worth every penny." Tears filled her eyes again. But these tears were different tears of relief, gratitude, and something deeper she hadn't felt in years. Still, Maria hesitated. I don't know how to accept something like this." "You don't have to accept it right now," Ethan said gently. "Just think about it. I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity or hidden motive. She found none. He looked at her with calm sincerity, the kind she had never seen in anyone else. For the first time in years, Maria felt a small spark of hope brighten inside her chest. Not the fragile hope that made her cry at night, but a warm, steady hope that maybe her life wasn't over. Maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe she wasn't as broken as she believed. She took a deep breath. "Ethan, thank you. Even if I don't know what to say, or how to accept help, thank you." "You don't have to say anything," he replied softly. "Just let me stand with you." Maria closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight she had carried for so long finally shift. Just a little. She wasn't healed. She wasn't safe yet. But something inside her felt lighter. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. And she wasn't. Because Ethan wasn't just offering help. He was offering a chance to reclaim her dignity, her strength, and her life. When Ethan made the offer to help her walk again, Maria felt her entire world shift, as if someone had reached into the darkness she lived in and gently lifted her toward the light. She didn't accept right away. She was scared to accept. She was scared that if she trusted too much, everything would fall apart again. But over the next few days, Ethan kept returning, with the same quiet patience he always carried. He didn't pressure her. He didn't bring up the topic unless she did. He simply stayed close, bringing her warm bread, talking to her mother kindly, fixing small things around their little house that had been broken for years. He changed a squeaking door hinge, repaired a loose shelf, even patched a hole in the roof without being asked. Maria tried telling him he didn't need to do all that, but he only smiled and said, "It's nothing. Just a bit of work." Her mother, who had watched Maria struggle for so long, grew fond of Ethan quickly. She prayed quietly that good things might finally be coming into her daughter's life. She had seen the sadness in Maria's eyes for too long, and the heavy load she carried alone. When she saw Ethan's steady kindness, she felt hope return in her heart. After a week of waiting, thinking, crying, and praying, Maria finally approached Ethan one afternoon. He was standing outside the general store, tying rope into neat coils. "Ethan." He looked up at her with that calm, warm smile. "Hey, Maria. You all right?" She held her hands together tightly. I thought about everything you said." He didn't interrupt. He kept his full attention on her. "And I think I'm ready to accept your help," she whispered. Ethan nodded once, slowly, as if he had been expecting this moment and didn't want to overwhelm her. "Good," he said gently. "We'll take it one step at a time." They arranged everything carefully. Ethan took time off from ranch work, hired a temporary hand to manage things for a week, and prepared for the journey to the city where the best prosthetic clinic was located. Maria had never been that far since the accident. The trip itself felt like a mountain she was afraid to climb. But Ethan stayed by her side every moment. Steady, patient, reassuring. The morning they left for the city, Maria woke early. She wore the cleanest dress she had, tied her hair as neatly as she could, and held her mother's hand for a long time before leaving. Her mother whispered, "Go, my daughter. You deserve this chance, and trust that good people still exist." Maria nodded, though tears filled her eyes. She kissed her mother's forehead, promising to return stronger. Ethan arrived with his wagon, prepared with extra blankets, water, and food so she could travel comfortably. He helped her climb inside with gentle hands, making sure she felt safe before starting the horses. The long road ahead was dusty, quiet, and lined with miles of fields. But even though the journey was long, Maria felt strangely calm. She kept glancing at Ethan, who held the reins with steady hands, his eyes fixed on the road, his posture relaxed. For hours, they talked about small things, her favorite colors, his horses, the weather, memories from childhood. She told him how she had loved dancing when she was young. He told her about a horse he rescued when it was sick. The conversation flowed smoothly, warm and gentle, like sunlight on a cool morning. For the first time in a long time, Maria forgot the heaviness of her past. When they reached the city, she grew nervous again. The noises, the crowds, the tall buildings, they overwhelmed her. But Ethan walked beside her with calm confidence. He guided her with a reassuring hand on her arm whenever she felt unsteady. Inside the clinic, the doctor examined her carefully. He explained what kind of prosthetic would work best for her and how long it would take for her to learn to walk again. Maria listened quietly, afraid of being too hopeful. But Ethan asked questions on her behalf, making sure she understood everything. The first fitting was emotional. The moment the doctor placed the temporary training prosthetic on her leg, she felt a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief. Her heart raced. She grabbed the support bars tightly, afraid of falling. But Ethan stood behind her, close enough to catch her if she slipped, yet far enough to let her stand on her own. "Take your time," he said gently. "I'm right here." Maria tried to put weight on her new prosthetic. It wobbled. Her hands shook. She gasped as her knee threatened to buckle. But she kept trying, again and again. Her arms trembled from holding herself up. Sweat formed on her forehead. Her breath came quickly, but she didn't give up. After a long moment, she managed to stand straight without the bars for 1 full second. She laughed weak, breathless, surprised by her own progress. Ethan smiled at her proudly. "There you go," he said softly. "That's the beginning." The next few days were filled with training. Maria fell more than once, but each time Ethan helped her back up. He encouraged her gently. He never let frustration show. Every small victory made her eyes shine brighter. Finally, the day came for her permanent prosthetic. It fitted her perfectly. It felt strong, balanced, safe. When she took her first real steps in front of Ethan, he clapped softly, as if celebrating something precious. Maria covered her mouth with her hands. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "I can walk." "You can," Ethan said proudly, "and you will walk anywhere you want now." When they returned to town, Maria stepped down from the wagon slowly, using her new leg with confidence she never imagined she could have again. People stopped and stared, not with judgment, but with amazement. They saw her walking again and whispered to one another. Children watched with wide eyes. Older women smiled proudly. Even those who had once doubted or ignored her felt something warm inside. Maria's mother cried when she saw her. She held her daughter tightly and thanked Ethan over and over. Maria laughed through tears, saying, "Mama, don't cry so much. See, I'm standing again." The sewing shop owner, who once let her go, visited a few days later and offered her work again. Maria accepted, grateful to have an honest income once more. As days passed, she found that people treated her with respect again. Customers admired her skill. Neighbors smiled at her warmly. Her little home was filled with hope, laughter, and quiet peace. Ethan visited often, though he always said he was just passing by. But everyone in town knew he came to see Maria, and Maria knew it too. She felt her heart calm whenever he approached. She felt safe when he was near. She felt like she didn't have to hide anymore. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Maria stood outside her house, watching Ethan tie his horse. She walked toward him with steady steps, each one a reminder of how far she had come. "Ethan," she said softly. He turned toward her with a gentle smile. "Yes?" "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. You didn't just help me walk. You helped me find myself again." Ethan looked at her with warm, sincere eyes. "You found your way. I only walked beside you." Maria felt her heart swell with something deep and unspoken. She didn't say it out loud, but she knew her life had changed forever because a cowboy with a kind heart stepped into her world when she needed someone most. And from that day forward, every step she took reminded her of courage, kindness, and the quiet power of a good man who refused to let her walk through her darkest days alone.